Hi there and welcome to a Drawing Basics demo. Today we're going to learn how to draw a jellyfish and a crab from direct observation with a photo reference. This will be our first photo reference. We're going to start with a jellyfish today. We're going to try to fit both the jellyfish and the crab onto the same paper. So let's work vertically. We're going to put the jellyfish at the top half of the paper and the crab on the bottom half of the paper. Whenever you start a drawing, you always want to start with what we call gesture lines or basic shape. Looking at the jellyfish, I can see that the head of the jellyfish is mostly an oval, so I'm going to start with that oval shape. You can notice as I'm working, I'm creating gesture marks or action lines to get the overall gesture or positioning or scale or proportion of that head that I'm starting with. I drew in another oval for the inside of the jellyfish head, and now I'm going to start with the overall gesture of the tentacles of the jellyfish. One of the reasons a jellyfish is such a great subject is because they're so organic and the drawing can be so forgiving. If you don't draw those tentacles exactly right, that's okay. It's still going to look like a jellyfish. Now that we have a basic gesture, we're going to start to focus on creating a nice, clean contour line drawing. Using the reference, I'm going to look at angles and shape, and I'm going to start to create a contour line outline drawing that follows along the outside of the head or the bell of the jellyfish, creating a more accurate depiction of what that looks like. The bottom of the bell has these really nice, unique bumps. So I'm going to erase my gesture line and try to create the overall look of those bumps. Notice that some of the lines come all the way down to the top of the bell or the top of the head as well. I'm now going to work on the back side of the jellyfish, and I'm going to start on the contour line of the tentacles of the jellyfish as well. And to do that, I need to erase that back section or my original gesture lines because I won't need those anymore. Before I do that, I'm just going to add a little bit more detail to the head. I added the shadow at the top of the head and a few more lines to kind of show the overall shape and curve of the bell of the jellyfish. Now let's start on the tentacles. Now, one thing I want you to note is that the tentacles don't have to be perfect. If this photographer had taken a photo of this jellyfish 5 seconds later, the tentacles would be shaped completely different because the jellyfish is so fluid as it moves through the water. That means that this is a low stress animal to be drawing. What I do want you to do is I want you to try to focus on as much detail as you can. Think of the tentacles, at least the yellow part of the tentacles, as a very organic, wavy line shape. It weaves in, it weaves out, it weaves in, and it goes all the way around in this nice, fluid, almost S shape across the paper. The more variation you put into this, the more interesting it's going to be. Feel free to erase your original gesture lines as you start to add in a nice clean contour line. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the other side. I can kind of see where it starts and how it flows behind the piece I already created. I can see some areas where you can see the blue water showing through in between the two sections. Whenever you can show overlapping, so it looks like one thing is going underneath the other, you want to do that because that always adds depth to your paper. Alright, so now we're going to create these long red tentacles that we can kind of see flowing along the rim of the bell of the jellyfish. Looking at the photo, I can see that there are quite a few of these long red tentacles. I'm not going to actually count how many there are and draw each one. I'm just going to add in a few that I think will add to the composition. What's unique about drawing a jellyfish is you have a little bit more creative freedom. You can decide where you want these red tentacles to flow, how you want them to flow, where you want them to overlap, where you want them to weave in and out. So really consider the composition. Where do you have a lot of white space? You can use these red tentacles to fill up those spaces. But let me show you what not to do. What you don't want to do with these red tentacles is you don't want them to weave in and out like we did with the yellow part of the tentacles. Instead, you want to think of these red ones as parallel lines. They run side by side, close together, and they don't touch. They don't weave in and out. It should be one continuous line and then a second one up close following its path. Erase your drawing in the area where these tentacles are going to flow because you shouldn't be able to see through them. Okay, I'm just about done with this one. I'm happy with the overall flow of the red tentacles. I feel like they're well balanced. Now let's move on to the crab. Unlike the jellyfish, the crab is going to be a little bit harder because his body is a little bit more geometric and not as fluid and ever-changing. So to get started, we're going to start with basic shape. And looking at his body, I can see that his body is almost a perfect square or rectangle. So draw that so that you can fit the legs in on the rest of the paper. Draw in little ovals for his eyes, and then let's consider his claws. One claw is much larger than the other, but both claws are made up of ovals and long triangles. Remember, at this stage, we're just focused on the gesture and basic shape. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the legs. The legs are a series of ovals stuck together with joints. As you draw, consider the angle of the ovals and how they connect and touch to each other. You also want to consider placement. Which one is higher than the other? Or look at where the claw is that we already drew in. Is the claw lower on the picture plane, or is the bottom of the leg lower on the picture plane? Unlike the jellyfish, where we didn't actually count how many tentacles there were, we do need to make sure that this crab has the right amount of legs. Now I'm going to move on to the other side. Remember, it's just a series of shapes stuck together. Two ovals and then a long, thin, triangular shape for the claw. Just try to consider placement, which part of the leg is higher than the other, how close is it to the other parts of the body. Look at the negative space that's being formed in between these legs, and so on. Okay, I think my overall gesture makes sense. So now I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning up the contour line, making it more realistic and connecting all of the gesture and basic shapes together to form one continuous outline. One thing you'll notice that I'm doing is I am making my pencil lines a little bit darker this time. The reason I'm doing this is so that it shows up better on video. I want you guys to continue to draw light. You never want to draw too hard, especially since we don't want our animals to have outline drawings around them. We're just starting with an outline so that we have a base point. As you draw, make sure that you're really referencing your photo. What kinds of angles do you see? What kinds of details and textures do you see? Draw everything you see. Don't draw what you know or what you think you know about a crab or a crab claw. Draw the actual shapes and details that you see, and it will all come together. Like, I couldn't tell you what's going on in his face. It almost looks like he's a little old man with a mustache. But that's what I saw, so that's what I drew. At this point too, you want to also start to erase some of those gesture lines you no longer need, cleaning up your drawing. Okay, now that I'm done with my contour line drawing, I'm going to start to add value. I'm going to use a 6B graphite pencil to add in value, and I'm going to use some blending stumps to smooth out that value. While some artists like to start with the lightest values and build up those values into darker ones, I always have my students start with the darkest value first. So with your graphite pencil, I want you to find the darkest values that you see in the photo. I think the eyes are the darkest, so I'm going to apply heavy pressure, pressing down hard, filling in all of the details of that dark value. And then I'm just going to work my way around the crab. So I'm just going to move down into the eyes, and I'm really taking a look at the photo. Where do I see dark values and light values? I'm going to shade those in with the graphite pencil, trying to make sure that my markings are very smooth as I work, trying to show dark values and letting them slowly fade into the lighter mediums. You never want anything to be solid and then just stop, and then medium and then just stop. Always apply heavy pressure and then light pressure as it fades into the next value. The other thing I want you to do is try to color in small, tight circles. By coloring in small, tight circles, you will ensure that the surface is nice and smooth, that the value is nice and smooth, and you won't see any line direction as you move around. Watch and try to mimic my technique as I move around the crab. Feel free to stop the video at any time so that you can continue to fill in your space as needed. One other thing I want to mention is that you don't really want to show any outlines, or you'd like to try to avoid outlines, because crabs in real life don't have outlines around their bodies. So to show the edges of objects or the edges of the parts of the body, you want to use contrast. So that front leg, it's dark at the bottom and it gets light as it moves up, and then the back leg is darker, and that helps outline where the separation of those two parts are. So use value contrast to show edges of objects and try to avoid outlines as much as you can. Okay, so I feel good about how I laid down value using just the graphite pencil, and now I'm going to pick up a blending stump. With the blending stump, I'm going to go over the value I've laid down on the paper and use small, tight circles and heavy pressure into light pressure as I blend and smooth out that value. If you don't have a blending stump, that's okay. You can use a Q-tip to blend the value. You can also take a piece of tissue and roll it up into a point and use that to blend as well. I'm going to use the blending stump throughout the crab, smoothing out the value I laid down and carrying that value into the lighter areas. If you pick up too much value on your blending stump and it's becoming too dark, just rub off the value on a little scratch paper and then continue to work around the crab. When you've gone around the crab with the blending stump, what you might want to do is pick up the graphite pencil again and go back over some of the areas where your dark values were blended out. You want to make sure that you have nice contrast, some really dark darks throughout. Use your eraser to clean up any mistakes, and you're done. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to look for demo 2 of this series to watch how we color in the jellyfish with colored pencil.